Hello and welcome to the Doña Ana County Clerks podcast.
We're so excited to have you here. We have another incredible episode lined up for you. Today, our office intern from NMSU, Patsy Garcia, will be talking with us about this topic. Hi, Patsy.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Go Aggies. I'm going to start off by saying that. Anytime anybody says they are going to NMSU, I always have to plug my beloved Aggies. Hi, everyone. Amanda Lopez-Askin, currently very happy and proud to serve as your Doña Ana County clerk. So today's episode is about pecans, not the pecans that they say in the South, okay? Pecans, and some history of the Bracero Farm Program. We have our special guest, Mr. Benjamin Segovia, who grew up and experienced life on the Stahmann Farms while his father was employed after migrating to the U.S. via the Bracero Farm Program. He will be joining us today, and we're super excited. And if you have not made that drive, basically under those beautiful pecan trees south of Las Cruces, you must do it. It is beautiful, amazing, especially in the summertime. But before we go any farther, we wanted to make sure to give our listeners some background on the Doña Ana County pecan industry and the Bracero Farm Program here in Doña Ana. And I'm going to kick it off to Patsy because she's done a lot of the research and she's as excited as we are.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. So today we're going to focus on these some of things about the pecan in Doña Ana County and in the state of New Mexico. But more so today we're going to talk about the Bracero program, and we have our guest, Mr. Benji Segovia, share his experience of growing up on the Stahmann Farms.
Let's just go ahead and talk about pecans before we talk to Mr. Segovia. Pecans are not native to New Mexico.
What?
I know. I didn't know this either. I didn't know. However, the dry air and soil conditions in New Mexico make pecan trees a prime crop. The dry air and sunny conditions provide what pecan trees love. Pecans arrived in New Mexico thanks to the famous Stahmann Farms in 1932.
Oh, I
didn't know that.
Yeah. Patsy, you did a good job.
Good job,
You taught
Patsy.
us
I did
something
know.
already.
How cool.
All right, you take it. You go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, like she said, pecan started in 1932 here, and it kind of originally started with Mr. Dean Stahmann had come to the Southwest looking to grow cotton. And in that time, he started to grow pecans where he brought the trees and he started planting them between the cotton rows, and that's how the farm started. So the USDA regional news release from January 24 reports that New Mexico's utilized pecan production in 23 is estimated at a record high of 100 million pounds, which is up 28% from the utilized output of 77.9 million pounds realized in 2022. The bearing acreage is at 50 acres, is up 2% from the previous years, and the average yield per acre totaled 2,000 pounds, up 410 from the prior year. And in 2023, the price per pound in New Mexico at 1.76 was 0.13 lower than the 2022 season. The value of the pecan production in New Mexico for the 2023 crop year totaled $176 million, which is up from 20% in 2022. And I'd also like to mention that New Mexico has averaged either number 2, or number 3 in the country, next to Georgia as far as pecan production goes. So pecans are a huge thing nationally for Doña Ana County and New Mexico.
Yeah, so I would say when we think about pecans, and that's why I kind of joke, like, we are not a pecan, we are pecans. And maybe we're at war with Georgia, like, on how to say it, right? But I think 1932 is a good history, and I'm looking forward to Mr. Segovia talking a little bit more about, because we always want to focus on the human interest. Like, this is great. We know we're green chili, pecans, we have NMSU, they have the Chili Pepper Institute, we have all these great things, but we always want to make sure to bring in like that human aspect. So like, what did it mean to be a bracero? What did that set up for generations? And I think it's a really powerful story. And we don't like to talk politics because God forbid, but I will say, like, it's a really kind of the route of immigration and how that was affected and all the things that really involved that, I think, is something that we do need to talk about. The largest single family pecan farm in the U.S. is located right here in the beautiful borderland of Doña Ana County, and that would be Stahmann Farms. They were established in 1926 when, again, W.J. Stahmann purchased 2,900 acres of land in the Mesilla Valley with the goal of growing cotton. The original intent was to grow cotton, However, as you said, they found that they planted some pecan trees, and guess what? They did pretty good, right? And so, again, that makes us one of the capitals of pecans in the entire country. I'm going to go and claim us number one today. And our records in Doña Ana County. And that's the thing about our office. We are literally the historians of Doña Ana County, right? So we hold many of those important records, whether we're talking about other things that voting or whether we're talking about some of the programs that have been established. We do have deeds on file for Stahmann Farms, and the oldest deed we have on file for Stahmann is from 1932.
Wow.
Yep, that's a long time ago. So Patsy, you're on.
So this is where we're beginning for the Bracero Farm and housing stories began here in Doña Ana County. According to the United States Library of Congress, a United States executive order called for Mexican Farm Labor Program, Bracero Program, to be established in 1942. This agreement was between the United States and Mexico, which allowed thousands of Mexican men to travel to and reside in the United States legally while working on short-term labor contracts.
Also, the Las Cruces News article reports, many of the Stahmann workers were recruited through the Bracero Program, a series of laws and diplomatic agreements initiated in 1942 when the United States signed the Mexican Farm Labor Agreement with Mexico. In order to provide laborers with adequate housing, the Stahmann family created several communities throughout their farmland, which is so fascinating to me. Really, each community had like its own mayor or like a property administrator who had morning meetings with the Stahmann Farms owner, Bill Stahmann. So this is so fascinating to me. Like they were their own,
It's like its own little town.
And
How
there were like multiple
cool.
little towns within the farm.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They had like many communities throughout the farms, and Benji's going to share that with you later. But Stahmann Farms was one of the Stahmann Farms built barrack-like homes on their property for farm workers to reside in. And they wanted to do this so that they could keep their farm labor workers working for longer periods of time. And so they provided housing. They have when we have individuals named like like Benji Segovia joining us today. He grew up on the Stahmann Farms, on the orchards, and his father was a farm labor employee there, and the Segovia family resided in those barrack-style homes. And Benji's going to share that with us today.
All right, and that kind of leads me to ask you questions and have this good conversation. What would you prefer to be called? I've heard Benji, Benjamin, what would you prefer?
Benji is normally.
All right, Benji. All right, I'm Amanda. So just okay. So Benji, you obviously know we're happy to have you today, and although we are talking about pecans, not the pecans, it's also really about the history of Doña Ana County, the Bracero Program, Stahmann Farms, and how important it was during that program era, and really what it did for, I would say, those. Now, I will tell you this, and this is me going rogue, right, which people love around here. I remember, I'm born and raised in Doña Ana County, and my family is from the southern part of my father's side of the family is from the southern part of Doña Ana County. And I remember hearing about, and you can tell me if this is true or not, because you are like one of the OGs, the originals that grew up there, that there was literally an investment that the Stahmanns made in the folks that worked with them and for them in terms of their futures. And they were able to really buy into the pecan industry because they were invested in a lot of ways, right? And so I would like for you to talk about that. And how innovative is that connected to like where immigration has come and gone and what things have been done and not done. I just think it's a fascinating topic and really like a feel-good one for me, like when I think about southern New Mexico. So I'm going to go back on script here, and I'm going to say, again, although it is about that, we want you are employed by the New Mexico Farm and Livestock Bureau here in Las Cruces, and you serve as the Regional Director and Event Coordinator. Well, congratulations on that. That's a big job. And so I'm going to go hand it over to you, and you can go rogue too. You're not limited to what we have here. We just want to make sure we include some of those historical facts so it gives folks watching and listening context to kind of what we're talking about. So tell us a little bit about yourself and this invitation and to participate and why you chose to be here.
Well, great. Well, thank you for inviting me to participate in your podcast. And I'll start with, and thank you, Patsy, for somehow doing in your research, you found me and asked me to participate. And so to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm actually a Texan. I was born in El Paso.
Hurrah. No, that's all right. We still like you.
And my whole life I've been telling people my heart's in New Mexico. The reason that I'm a Texan is because when my parents moved to Stahmann Farms, the medical facilities in Las Cruces were not as adequate as they would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
But the medical facilities in El Paso were much better since it was a larger city. And so I was born in El Paso. So my first 3 days, or 2 or 3 days, was in El Paso. The rest of the time was here in New Mexico. Okay, I am the sixth child of a large family. There was 10 siblings, and of course my parents. And so we all worked. Give you a little bit of family history. My older siblings were born in Mexico. My dad participated in the Bracero Program, came to the United States working on that program, but my dad had been exposed to the United States before. He and his parents moved to California, and then his parents passed away in a car accident, of all things, in Santa Ana, California. So he returned back to Mexico because he felt that raising his siblings was easier in Mexico than raising them here in the United States. So he stayed with the siblings, raised them. Then he married my mom, and they started their family in Mexico. Then he participated in the Bracero Program, and he actually migrated to a small farm, north of Stahmann, the current day Stahmann Farms. From that, from that farm, he moved to a farm in La Mesa.
And Benji, is that you all were still in Mexico at the time?
My family was. I wasn't born.
You weren't born yet. So he was basically going back and forth as like that. Is that how it worked? He went to see his family, but he would work in chunks of time.
Yes.
Okay. So I just kind of want to understand. So he was, when you say he was working here and there, he was solo, and his family was still in Mexico at the time.
Correct.
Okay.
And so then from that, when he started working for Mr. Tejas, the farmer in La Mesa, Mr. Tejas sponsored him because you had to have a sponsor to bring your family here.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Tejas sponsored him to bring his family, and my older siblings moved to La Mesa. During that time, my dad, here in the Doña Ana County, word was that Stahmann Farms was a great place to go work. So he went and he applied for employment at Stahmann Farms. He got hired at Stahmann Farms, and then my family moved to Stahmann Farms. That I was born during that, as that transitioned, and then from there, not only was I born, but 4 other siblings of mine were born here. They were born in Las Cruces. I'm the only one that was born in El Paso. And so
I'm sure they give you a hard time about that.
well, I mean, amongst our family, we all picked on each other.
And that was yours, right?
On certain things. And then the other thing is that I was in the middle of, there were 7 boys, and I had 3 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. So I always had 3 enemies and 3 best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's nice.
So other than that, me being here, growing up here at Stahmann Farms, it was a great place to grow. Not only for us, my family, but for other families. And we developed great friendships with a lot of people that were there. Even to this day, there's a group that has a Stahmann Farms reunion 2 or 3 times during the year. Unfortunately, I've been able to attend 2 of those over the last 5 years. There's one coming up here April 22nd, I believe, in El Paso.
And so they talk about the barracks, and I think the barracks sometimes go, I've been on that road many times. You know, back in the day when there was we had a chopes occasionally. You know, I always liked that nice scenic route, and I've seen the homes, right? I have they call them barracks. I always just thought of them as homes, and it seems very like a community. It didn't seem industrial like barracks are in the military, etc. What was your experience in terms of, we're calling them barracks, that was your home, that was your family's homes. Did it feel, it sounds like you did have that sense of community.
We did have that community, that sense, because what happened was there was barrack-style housing. In other words, there'd be 8 units, and then there'd be what would be community bathrooms. And so it was, keep in mind that it was done for men.
Single men, yeah.
Most of the braceros were men. and so it was designed for that. But as families started to grow, then they would take it was 2-room units, and then they would build doorways into 2 other units, so the families would be able to use four rooms rather than the 2 rooms. I mean, can you imagine a family of 10 in 2 rooms?
Well, my mom was one of 14 in a smaller, like, so I can actually.
So eventually those became less, plus they added more.
Right.
They had facilities on the farm where they could build portable barracks, portable buildings. And so some of the other braceros that were here that were not able to bring their families would live there.
Can you tell us about some of the other family names, and maybe any of our listeners or watchers/listeners would maybe recognize some of them in current day? Because I know here we have listed the names that you remember, Ojito, Rincon, kind of. Can you talk about those a little bit?
I'll give you names of families that were there in the section that we were at. There were the Diaz, Arias, Jara, Avitia.
I know an Avitia.
Hernandez. It was just a mixture of Alvarado. I mean, I can think of a lot of names, Hispanic names, and usually there was Chavez.
There's a Lopez in there, I'm sure, because I am a Lopez.
Yes.
And here they were called the homes were called certain things, or the neighborhoods.
No. The names that you have there.
Yeah.
Within the farm, there's sections, and every section has a name. So let's go. I'm going to start with Ojito, which is located on the southwestern corner of the orchard itself, and then Rincon, and Ojito is named after where a stream starts. Okay, Rincon, the corner of the farm, and then as you start moving north, Lomas. We actually grew up in a community that was called Lomas, and it was basically on a hill. So certain physical
characteristics
would dictate what the name was. And then there's a lot of Christian names, La Fe, the faith, Cristo, Christ, Cristo Nuevo, Cristo Viejo, Palmilla was another one, north. And so you see all that, and so in your history you said the amount of acreage, but then actually it increased when the Stahmann family bought the northern part of the farm, which is the Snow Ranch, and so I've always known it as Snow Ranch, but it was Snow Ranch 1, Snow Ranch 2, and Snow Ranch 3. So those 3 communities were up in the new part of it. So again, those names, and the names would help in the sense that it helped the mayordomo or the foreman to dictate where you're going to be. There was Lomas Uno would be one field, Lomas Dos would be another field, and so it was able to give you directions to where you were. There was also the production of geese, and so the geese would go and eat for weed control. And so they
now they do goats, right? But I guess it was geese back then.
It was geese. And then he went into the egg laying business. And so there was
chickens,
hen houses where they produce eggs, and then they also had a slaughter facility for sending the chicken for like dog food, and the geese. And so they would contract those out to different entities that would.
It sounds like they were very innovative in how they were utilizing the agricultural roots, in terms of like they would be like, oh, we should do this as well, and it worked. And then it sounds like then they added and continued to add to their industry, which kind of probably helped them be very self-sustaining. And you talk about that a little bit, that the farm was a self-sustaining entity, even have like groceries, etc.
Correct. And so. But as you see, in my time, I saw it evolve. They used to have a store, and that store was for the employees. Anybody could go in there and buy a candy bar or a soft drink, but it was actually for the employees to be able to go in and buy groceries. And as a young man going to middle school, I would get off the bus there. and then I'd go in and I'd buy a soda and a candy bar. I didn't have money. I just signed the paper.
Oh.
And then they would
Yeah.
deduct that from my dad's paycheck. And so I had to be careful because I couldn't.
You didn't want to
go
get in
overspend.
trouble. Yeah, no.
Okay. And as I grew up, and then I started doing chores or jobs there on the farm, weeding, whatever it is that required me to do at that age. Then I had my own account so I could go spend my own money and sign on my own name. And then come payday, they would deduct that from my paycheck, and that's how I do it. But then my paycheck, I would contribute to my family, because our whole structure was, you're going to work, you're going to work. We all work. All of my brothers and sisters have a very strong work ethic, and so, but the money was to help the family structure survive. I mean, feeding 10 mouths and growing like that, it was economically hard on my parents, but all of us contributed to do that.
That's
Right.
good.
Kind
That's
of a
sweet.
collectivist kind of So when you were called about this, the Bracero program, when you were talking to, kind of probably sent you back in your own mind to thinking about your family history and origins in the southern part of the state, and what would you want? Like, what do you want people to understand and know about that program and the Stahmann family?
I want them to know how forward thinking they were,
Yes.
how they took care of the people that worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
They did a tremendous job at doing that. The other thing is there's a stigma being attached to being a Mexican American, and so everybody says you swam across the river, you're an illegal alien, you're a word mojado, all that. It was hard to respond to that because we didn't experience any of that. My parents and a lot of the other parents that were on the farm brought their families over here legally, and I can actually say my dad never crossed the river, never crossed the international line illegally. He did it the legal way, and so with that being said, he even when he signed up for the Bracero program, and he was for a period of time, I don't remember it was 2 years or 4 years, but when he went back, he talked to me one time about having to get on a bus and travel to McAllen, Texas, to go re-enlist in the Bracero program, and then he traveled back over here. But it was a venue which could be utilized to bring their families over and start them, and basically every single parent that was there that participated in the Bracero program sacrificed. They sacrificed to come and catch not only their portion of the American dream, but to better everybody else, the children, and their offsprings.
And can we talk about that level of, it sounds like, respect and community that you experience? So you're right, there is these narratives that can be challenging. We focus on history here in our office and elections, ironically, but can you talk about that sense of, because I think sometimes we look back at our family background, I always say, like, my people have lived for hundreds of years on these lands, and that's true. It is absolutely true. But I will also say, with some of the narrative, and when you hear some of the negativity, and you think about the relationship between the two countries that sat there and said, this would be good for both of our countries. It would give you workforce. It would extend this American dream possibility to people that live in Mexico that maybe want to immigrate. And then, there's this whole narrative now. How do you how do you make sense of it for yourself?
We had a sense, the farm wasn't ours. Physically, it was not ours. But we had a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
We took care of it like it
Investment,
was ours.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it was for the good of not only my family, but every family that was there.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I talk about my family and my brothers and sisters' work ethic, it also carried for the other people there.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're right, as things have evolved, we had much better relationships with Mexico. In my current work, I happen to deal with a lot of issues. The immigration, big issue. labor issue, big issue. You mentioned chili. Chili production in New Mexico has been reduced because of labor issues or lack of labor.
And we did touch on this in our podcast with Travis today. We talked about, in fact, we told him we'd probably bring him back to do an entire episode just talking about labor. But that farmers are looking to bring in more laborers because there just aren't enough laborers right now.
It's a tragedy when you see crops and food sources literally wasting because there's not the workforce that is available to harvest them, and I know that has been something that has been talked about nationally, but obviously I'm focused on here. But what about the Stahmann family now? And do you all still, you talk about the reunion, are they still actively involved in any of those things, or are there connections? How did that play out over the years?
Their family evolved also because it was Dean Stahmann, the man that did the initial investment, and he had 2 sons, and he had a daughter, but you hardly ever saw her, or at my age. Keep in mind that I was a baby and I really didn't pay attention for most of what was going on around me.
Right.
In the first 10 years.
Right.
I was busy playing in the big playground.
As you should be.
Farms,
yeah, that's
right?
awesome. What a memory, right? Playing in
Yes.
Stahmann Farms in your childhood.
But the family itself, they diversified and put another pecan orchard in Australia.
Oh.
And so one of the brothers
I have never heard that.
was
Me
in
neither.
charge
That's
of
so
the
cool.
farm in Australia.
That's awesome.
And the other brother stayed here. And of course they had sons and daughters. Well, the one in Australia had daughters. The one here had sons and daughters. And so you're looking at now at the 3rd generation.
Yeah, it's a different
And
legacy.
they have gotten married, and now they have the 4th generation.
Yeah.
And so there was, and we socialized and commingled and everything else with some of the family members.
It also sounds like the reason you said that you knew you wouldn't own it, but you were invested. Part of the reason it sounds like because the Stahmann family overall and the management of the farm in general were good to you all.
Yes. And so not within the Stahmann family, and they adapted. I can tell you that the kids are very fluent in Spanish.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
know that they had a lady, a Mexican-American lady, or I should say a Mexican lady that migrated here. And she was the I don't even want to call her a housekeeper. She was there. She prepared traditional Mexican foods, taught the children, all of them, Tres, which is Bill Stahmann the 3rd, was the oldest, and then there was a daughter named Peggy, and then Randy, and then there was Sally, and those were the 4. And so I can tell you that to this day you can sit across the table from Sally, and she'll talk to you in Spanish just like I'm talking to somebody in Mexico.
Yeah.
So that's
the cultures and the language and some of the probably norms kind of integrated because you all were your own little town. You were your own entity. So I can see how those would commingle, and it sounds like in a really positive way that you feel really good about and proud about.
Yeah, it was interesting because we could any adult on that farm could discipline you if you were doing something wrong. And it wasn't that it was.
No, I know.
In
I
the eyes
understand.
that you could say that it was wrong. I'll give you an example. When I was younger, real young, probably 10 years old, we used to collect Coke bottles or soft drink bottles and turn them into a little truck that used to come to the communities. La Troquita Maria, the yellow truck is what we called it. Okay, and so you collect Coke bottles and then you could sell those bottles or turn them in for the deposit value. And so I would go to where they were the truck drivers. There was a parking area where they parked the company vehicles, and I would find bottles in there. And so I would take them. So it wasn't wrong. It was what it was is some of the drivers would want to keep their bottles so that when they went and bought their next soft drink, they would trade in and get the the 5 cents discount. Well, we'd collect it and take that 5 cent discount away from them. But at the same time, we're cleaning up the areas
Right.
per se. But it was like, and so you go into private property values, that bottle belonged to them, but we went and took it.
So they had to get after you about that, and you
So,
had to
yes.
listen.
Correct. And I
Yeah.
actually got scolded one time by Dean Stahmann, the owner of the farm. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, I had it.
Did you tell me you were an entrepreneur? Or it didn't quite work.
And I dragged it over to where we were at. And so little things like that. But him scolding me, okay, it had an effect. But it was, okay, what's wrong, what's right? And I'm going like, but I won my candy, so I continued. But not going and stealing or taking
Right.
those
Yeah.
bottles from there.
Following the rules after that.
It was a great, I'm telling you, it was a great
You know, I think we
setting.
think about Americana, right? We think about like what that looks like across the country. And some people have memories of, growing up in cornfields or, next to the ocean. And I think it's something that we always should focus on and capitalize is that we have a beautiful history in southern New Mexico. I've heard about the Bracero Program for many years. And didn't necessarily know the details, so I'm glad Patsy did the research. But to have somebody who lived, worked, grew up, had family, was embedded in that community, I think is exceptionally valuable that you were able to come and tell us about it. What have we not asked you that you think it's important that we understand? Or, I mean, even anybody listening that understands that maybe has never heard of the Bracero Program or the community that you all created.
I'm going to circle back to when I said we didn't own the farm.
Mm-hmm.
The dream incorporated into each one of the families that was there was to own home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like my parents, they bought land in Mesquite, and they set up a mobile home there, and it was theirs.
Yeah.
Okay, so it created that opportunity for them. There was other families. There's a community called Del Cerro Estates.
Mm-hmm.
There by Vado, Mesquite Vado
Yes.
area. A lot of those families were for braceros that came and attained the home ownership that was part of that American dream. And so you see that it wasn't a 3,000 acre farm, but it was
Theirs.
And so so you see that, and then you also see that's like one notch up.
Mm-hmm.
Because now the offspring, like me, I own my own house
Mm-hmm.
now. I actually have some investment properties also. So, but it was back from. It's important that we buy our housing. It's important that you own your, as you go in through the main American stream, that you do those things.
Right. There's a level of, I hate to use the word status, but I don't know what else to use. There's a level of, I guess, propriety. There's a level of coming up that is always the goal in terms of immigration and what you want to do next. And so it sounds like your family, and then the ripple effect was, I remember, I would imagine from 10 siblings is kids that then realize their dreams and then their kids, right? And so it's like this unfurling of something I think is exceptional and particular to Doña Ana County. I would actually love to have the Stahmann family come and to talk about this a little more. I mean, I don't know if they'd be willing to, but it'd be definitely something that would be interesting. And I think that they have an exceptional legacy. We talk about legacy and the pecans and kind of their business, et cetera. But I think the human factor in what they did, what they have done, and what they established can't really be quantified in terms of the ripple effect of the families in our community. So
We're also talking about just with that stability, how your parents had home ownership and then their children home ownership, just a stability for their children is so important. Especially we can talk about development and things like that, and how important it is for parents to own a home and to have that ownership and to have somewhere where their children feel safe is so important. And so, but also I think it's so amazing what the Stahmanns did in creating community. And you really think about how, I wonder if they thought about it because in Mexican culture, where you grow up and who you grow up with is really important.
Correct.
And so I wonder if they just hey, let's build it and they will come, or if they just, I don't know. It'd be interesting just to know.
yeah, it sounds like your parents are exceptional as well.
Mm-hmm.
I will say to raise that amount of kids, to make sure that they had a stable home, to instill a work ethic, to have a connectedness to community, and to continue that legacy. I think, what are your parents' names, their first names?
My dad's name was Ruben, and my mom's name was Pabla.
Pabla.
But and interestingly enough, in the Mexican group that was there, the word Doña and Don
Mm-hmm.
are very respected.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't get that name.
Ah.
And so they were both known as Don Ruben and Doña Pabla.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Well, that makes me a little bit, I think, yes. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to give kudos to your parents for creating something that continues to live on. And thank you for sharing your story for sure. We're going to send this to you so you can send it to your siblings, and we can all give a shout out to your exceptional parents who created something. And thank you for coming here today and sharing your story. And we hope you come back. Maybe we'll have one of the Stahmanns, and you can share all this old stories or whatever. We would love that.
It would be good. I'll tell you that it'd be a good starting point was obviously the Stahmann would be Sally Stahmann there on the farm. But you might also want to coordinate with some of the people that coordinate that put together
The reunion?
the reunion.
Yeah, that would be great.
And to give them credit, several years back, I would even venture to say 10, 12 years ago, when they first had a Stahmann Farm family reunion, they had it here in Las Cruces, and they actually invited the Stahmann family to come, and some of the members did come.
That's
did
exceptional.
attend. Okay, but again, part of it is that I'm still employed,
Yeah.
so I take care of my employment responsibilities.
Yeah.
But I also see a lot of faces, a lot of names, a lot of things that goes back to Stahmann Farms. When I first graduated from high school and started attending New Mexico State, I was selling vehicles, and it was amazing to see how many people from Stahmann Farms would come in and buy a vehicle, and the mere fact that they said we're working at Stahmann Farms elevated
They were
them
good.
to their
They
credit
could
status
buy their
was, there's nothing in writing from the bank or
Yeah.
anything else, but it was known. This person that is here with that background, he pays his bills. He's responsible.
They're in.
He's doing.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you for being here with us today. It'd be great if we could circle back. I would also say we're going to go ahead and do an unofficial, this is definitely dedicated to Don Ruben y Doña Paula. And we thank them. Yeah. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching today. We, learn something new every time that we do a podcast. And this was something that, as somebody born and raised in Doña Ana County and who is deeply rooted here, I'm very proud to bring to you. We are very proud. And thank you to Bern. Thank you to Jacob. Thank you to Cynthia. And a big thank you to Patsy, our NMSU Go Aggies intern, for doing this research.
Yeah.
Patsy, we appreciate this. And I'm sure you're from northern New Mexico, so I'm sure this was a cool story to hear for you as well.
It was definitely a fun project to do, and I was excited as I got deeper into research. And when I first had my conversation with Mr. Segovia, I was absolutely intrigued. I loved his stories, and I walked away that morning from after hanging up on the cell phone, feeling like I just talked to a huge pillar of history. The story just resonated in me, and we had so many times that we connected on levels, coming from a Hispanic, a Mexican background and Native American background, and some of the similarities we had growing up rural and growing up ranching and farming. And even when we shared stories about the store there on the farm, I related to how the trading posts came to Navajo country and how some of the things were similar. And when my grandparents and great-grandparents signed off on products they bought from those trading posts. So I was able to relate. And even more today, just sharing and hearing about his parents and the respect they had and the contributions they made, to Doña Ana County and those farms. And I feel like this Bracero program just in many ways elevated the farming industry and the sense of community, like Bernadine said, so important. And I just feel like our Mexican American and those not historical, but the heritage and the background we have as minority and people of color, family is always the center core. family is always that thing, and it feels like it just grew. So you asked a question earlier, whether Stahmann Farms built these barracks. Build them and they'll come, absolutely they'll come, but we'll absolutely bring our sense of family and our sense of work ethics as we go and we look out for one another, because we always want to keep growing our families and looking out. And in our Native American culture, we have this concept, and it's called the center fire. And that center fire, in a Navajo way, there's a hogan, and it's built in a circular way, and there's certain aspects in that hogan, but it always comes down to that center family, which represents fire, family. It represents protection. It represents food. It represents comfort and safety. And that's kind of the theme that I felt today when Benji was talking, and I kind of felt like I was sitting in Benji's home, just like, and it felt comforting and warming. And I just want to thank you so much, Benji, for coming and visiting us today and sharing your stories. And I really have a lot of admiration for those stories and how you grew up. And I'm really happy for you. And I feel like I have a good place in my heart for all of that. And I'm thanks to the clerk's office, Amanda, Carolyn, and Cynthia, for allowing me to do this project. It really was a lot of fun.
Great. We're happy to have you. We're happy you're part of our team. And again, thank you to Mr. Segovia. We hope to have him back. Please share this far and wide, in southern New Mexico especially. I think more people need to know about the exceptional roots that we have, and the sense of community that was created and continues to live on. So thank you so much for listening and watching. We will see you next time.